Oftentimes you can't use a built-in reveal filter to pass parameters to a custom query or a function or a stored procedure. In this example, I have a function in my Postgres database called cust_orders_orders. It expects a user ID parameter to execute. So in my change data source item, I am picking up the data source item, and I have the option to check the ID, table, function, procedure, title, etc., based on the data source. In my case, I am simply going to get the ID of the incoming request, which is going to be customer order orders. And then whenever this gets passed in, I'm going to execute this function, which is going to be the same name, and I'm going to pass in the UserContext.UserID. In the UserContextProvider, I'm pulling in a simple header called xHeader1 from the client, and then I'm going to pass that as the default UserID property in the UserContext object. To create my dashboard, if I look at indexdsi.html, I am using the setAdditionalHeadersProvider to make sure that whatever header I want to send to the server gets picked up by that UserContextProvider. In this case, I'm going to pass something called xHeader1 to this headers array, and in that, I'm going to pass the selected user ID from my select up here. So I have a few options: Elfkey, Anatar, Blouse, Blom-P. Those will get sent over to the server when the callback occurs to create this particular visualization or dashboard. So if I right click and I run this in the browser, you'll see that I have my select here. I'm going to click plus visualization. I'll select customer orders orders. It's expecting a customer ID parameter. By default, I picked up Elfkey. So let's just change this to a grid. Let's do company name. Let's do customer ID, employee ID, freight, order date, just a few items here. We can do address and city, etc. We'll just call it customer order orders. I'll check that box. And then this dashboard, I want to call it customer orders. And we will check this box. So how do I load that dashboard now with the variable user ID? If I hit refresh, of course, this is the index DSI, and all I'm doing here is starting in edit mode. So let's take a look at load dashboard. If I scroll up, you'll see that load dashboard does have additional customer IDs in the select. So I need to get this variable passed over to the server so it gets picked up. If I scroll down, you'll see it's the same code for setAdditionalHeadersProvider. And then in my load dashboard function, I have orders by customer. Let's make sure if I drill into my dashboards, I actually called it customer orders. Let's go ahead and fix this. So let's call this customer orders. So I pick up the dashboard that I just created, and I'm going to load that into my reveal view. But how do I make sure that that xHeader1 is populated? If I scroll down to when this page is loaded, I'm actually going to set my headers for the first time when the page loads based on the customer ID from the select. I'm going to log this, but that xHeader1 will get updated, and then I'm going to call load dashboard. But then I've also added a listener. So anytime the customer ID changes, I want to call update headers and refresh dashboard. So in update headers and refresh, I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to pass in the selected customer ID, and then I'm going to call reveal view.refreshDashboardData. And what that will do is it'll refresh the dashboard data by going through the life cycle again on the server to make sure that whatever's in that xHeader1 is going to return the correct data. So if I right click, view this in the browser, I loaded this up, Elfkey is selected, there's Elfkey. Now I'm going to change this to Blom-P. I just refresh dashboard data, reset my xHeader1, and it refreshed my dashboard. If I look at Chops, we'll see that Chops is here, and I've got my Chop Suey. And if I go down to Dumon, we'll see that the data updates for Dumon. So when refresh dashboard data occurs, I'm going through that life cycle again on the server of pulling in the user context provider and then using that in my data source provider to pass the correct variable to the server. So the key to this entire process is two things. First, make sure that you're using the correct function name, procedure name, table name to call your function. And then on the client side, when you're loading the dashboard, make sure that when you do change whatever that external component is that updates your header, you are refreshing the dashboard data on the reveal view so it knows to go re-trigger the query execution.